Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to a new season of Indie Game Friday, where each week I take a look at an independent role-playing game. This year, we're going to follow a similar format and rule set as last year. Covered games may be new or old, free or paid for, but must either have had a full release or be in a feature-complete, stable form prior to being considered, which will necessarily rule out the majority of early access titles. I think it's actually important to define what I consider indie or even RPG. As far as I'm concerned, indie means either self-published or published by a small company with limited resources. Games published by moderately sized companies and larger will be considered only if the game was finished with development prior to the arrangement and only signed on for later distribution after it already hit market. As for the RPG aspect, so many games now have RPG elements that the definition will get a little foggy at the end. I will occasionally cover a game that fits more in another genre, but I will try to keep consideration to games that are as near to RPG as I can. Finally, as usual, I will try to focus on games with some sort of redeeming quality, as with all of my reviews. And now, after that considerable introduction that will hopefully not need to be repeated further this season, let's immediately look at a game that very nearly breaks some of those very rules, and yet I've decided to cover it anyway. Legie. Developed and published by, and I'm probably going to butcher this pronunciation, Spithenyev. It was originally released back in 2007, but recently became available on Steam for just $1.99 US. A mix of adventure game and dungeon crawler, Legie follows the progress of an apprentice innkeeper in the medieval Czech town of Jelemnice. Again, probably butchered the pronunciation. After listening to the woes of the patrons and suffering the innkeep's verbal abuse, the main character sets out into the dreary world in search of a restock of beer. A quest that, while simple on its face, may end up requiring a deal with the devil itself. I'm going to be upfront here. The graphics would have been somewhat dated even on release. The English translation is almost laughably bad. The puzzles which the game relies on are often obtuse in a manner that recalls the early days of point-and-click adventures, and the combat, when it occurs, is so clunky that it makes Morrowind's combat system look sleek and fluid by comparison. Add to this the fact that the game is relatively short, just over a few hours with the walkthrough, likely a fair amount longer without, and everything indicates that this game should be considered terrible. And a number of people might consider it so, but the devil, not to tie in too much with the plot, is in the details. In terms of interface, the game has a very simple mouse-driven world interaction. You can look about with the mouse, the cursor will change or text will appear when you can interact with things, and the cursor will change into an arrow when you can move. Movement follows a similar step-based format common amongst classic first-person grid crawlers, except for the small out-of-town section that just turns those grid steps into longer travel nodes between areas. Right-clicking opens the inventory bar along the bottom of the screen that allows you to collect objects and then use them on spots within the world to solve various puzzles. Dialogue, by contrast, simply zooms in on the person you're speaking with and offers a choice of responses. And while the translation from the original language flirts with the so bad it's funny territory, if you can actually get past that and understand the underlying story, you might be in for a treat. The setting of the game is during the medieval period, specifically during a time threatened by the Black Death, and the atmosphere is of a town beset on all sides by misfortune, where people are troubled by their own miseries, and is very well done. In fact, I'd almost say that it was worth the $1.99 admission price just for the inspiration for me to use in tabletop games. Your mileage, of course, may vary. A lot of the initial progress will be moving from area to area solving puzzles, until you enter the mines at least. Once within the mines, you are treated to a simplified true dungeon crawl. It basically involves exploring the place and trying not to die, while you pick up various items to finish quests and puzzles in the town and in the other nearby caves. There is a combat system, but this system, as I said, is clunky in the extreme, consisting of simply swinging your character's weapon or blocking with their shield, and even those are limited until you actually get a shield or a weapon, which you can't until you find them in the dungeon itself. If you run into an enemy before you find your weapon, you're just going to get killed, since there's no way to actually retreat from combat. Fortunately, the weapon is just a couple of turns into the first mine, and opponents aren't random, but rather appear when you take specific steps. This means that you can learn where they are, but also means that once they're gone, and you don't have to worry about any respawns. Unfortunately, you don't have to worry about character progression either, since there's no real way to improve your character's statistics. Just items to find, a few weapons to equip, and wine to drink to replenish your health if needed. And therein is the main problem with this game, at least in my opinion. You have a number of the most critical elements of an RPG. Inventory to manage, storylines to unravel, choices to make, although very few have overwhelming effects on the story in general, an environment to explore, and combats to engage in. And yet almost everything is there in a standard adventure as well. So I'd say that it's more of an adventure game than an RPG, except that once you start entering the mines and accomplishing quests, it feels more RPG-ish, even if it's still technically following adventure game tropes. But that aside, is the game worth the money overall? The graphics, as I mentioned, were dated even when it was released over a decade ago, and the intervening years have not been doing it any favors. The sound design is nice, I'll give it that, and the mouse-driven interface is easy to acclimate to. I did state that the combat was clunky a couple times already, but I think that has less to do with the interface and more to do with the underlying functionality of the combat itself. I believe the underlying atmosphere, however, and the storyline of the game more than make up for it, if you recognize Legie's limitations and its age. Of course, whether a game is worth it to you is always something that you're going to have to decide according to your own budget. But for me, Legie was one of those titles where this holds more true than usual. Its limitations and the fact that it is more adventure than RPG are definitely going to put a lot of people off. But as far as I'm concerned, I had a lot more fun with it than I had with a few higher-priced games that I've played. The true medieval, non-fantastic, and non-heroic genre is a little bit underserved, and quite frankly, I'll take what entries I can get in it. I'll definitely have to recommend this only to those select few who can overlook its many shortfalls or who might find some amusement from them, or those who, like me, take inspiration from computer RPGs and apply it to other things, such as writing or tabletop gaming. At any rate, I'll leave it at that. I'll leave a link in the description below as always. This has been the RPG Crawler with Indie Game Friday Legie. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you've got feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content, both tabletop and computer. If you're feeling particularly generous, I do have a Patreon at patreon.com/rpgcrawler. Until next time, take care and goodbye.